Good evening. We're still talking about the action of the Election Commission or the lack of it on various things that are happening in our election during campaigning and whether or not the Election Commission could have done or should have done something up till now. Now, a lot of the questions that came in when I put out this detailed video on the powers and the duties of the Election Commission from you were, can the Supreme Court intervene? Isn't there something we can do as citizens? Can a PIL be filed about the fact that we believe that the Election Commission is not doing enough? So to answer that question, I've asked Sanjay Hegde, Senior Advocate with the Supreme Court, to join us this evening, and he's been kind enough to do so. Mr. Hegde, good evening, and thank you for joining us. There is a long list of things that people have grievances about as far as this election is concerned. I'm going to go one by one. To begin with, there was what the Election Commission called an objectionable post shared by the Karnataka arm of the BJP, the official arm. It was an animated video. I'm sure you've seen it.
Yes.
The EC asked Twitter to take it down or X to take it down the day after voting ended in Karnataka. There's no word on whether Meta, which is Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, has been asked to take it down, and no action taken against the political party that actually put it up. Do you believe the EC acted fully within its duties in this particular case?
Well, the EC has acted for the sake of action. Its powers are vast. If it had directed the Karnataka BJP to take it down immediately, no sooner had that it had been put up, and if it had penalized the Karnataka BJP in some manner, that okay, one day off campaigning or something, and such an action, if it had been then challenged in the courts, I'm sure that the courts would have upheld the ECI's actions, because courts say that, look, the Election Commission's powers under 324 are vast, and it is tasked with holding independent, free and fair elections. If there's anything that comes in the way of free and fair elections or that affects free and fair elections, and if the ECI does something to undo that damage, then normally it's upheld by the courts. Now, the ECI has essentially given what is less than a slap on the wrist. It has allowed the damage to be done. After the date of elections in Karnataka, it has called upon only the platform to deplatform that objectionable video, and it's only called one of the platforms. It is possibly still going viral on other platforms. It's still going, being passed from hand to hand on WhatsApp. If the ECI wanted it, it would have banned that video completely, or other videos of the same character. But it has not done so. Now,
Mr. Hegde, yes, please go ahead. Forgive me. Go ahead.
The obvious question is, can somebody file an appeal? See, but of course, anybody can file an appeal. And the Supreme Court may possibly look into it. It may even possibly nudge the constitutional authority in some way or the other. But the Supreme Court can't micromanage elections. It has to be the Election Commission, and the Election Commission has to be, cognizant of its own powers and its own perception in the eyes of people.
Mr. Hegde, there have been a series of speeches been made to begin with by the Prime Minister and then by other members of his party, which have targeted one particular religious community, which have spread a lot of falsehoods that need to be fact-checked, which could arguably be called inflammatory, which the Election Commission has perhaps not taken any cognizance of at all. Is there any other law other than the Model Code of Conduct that can be enforced in this account?
Well, the ordinary law still operates, right? So, if, for instance, a video is released somewhere, but it is also then visible in other states, where it can cause a law and order problem. There's nothing which prevents the opposition ruled states from taking action. In fact,
Hmm.
I think Karnataka has taken action against uh, president of the BJP and the head of its IT cell in respect of some video.
Yes.
So the ordinary law can also swing into action, but uh, both the political parties as well as the election commission are right now doing a slow dance and hoping that the storm blows over.
Mr. Hegde, given the fact that a free and fair election is the foundation of our democracy, if we consider all of the instances that have played out so far, instance like in Surat where other candidates have
All
withdrawn their candidature,
yes.
incidents like the speeches that we're talking about, the videos that are doing the rounds, in your opinion, are we having a free and fair election?
The question to be asked is: Are we are having elections? Can we still call it free and fair?
Yes.
There have been incidents in various parts of the country. Those incidents may form a pattern, but right now, do they form an overwhelming pattern, or are there local incidents which can be then dealt with later, also through election petitions to set aside the election of those who have been elected unopposed and things like that? But then the election petition routine also takes its own God's own time. So,
So,
is it a free and fair election? The answer is if you allow it to be. If the election commission were to, where there is enough pressure from either the election commission or a strong opposition, there is still substantially a fair election. But where there is no opposing force, then elections are tending to get more and more in namesake only.
do you believe there is room here for the Supreme Court to take suo motu cognizance?
See, the power of suo motu is always there, but that has over the years uh, been in as a matter of self-discipline, not resorted to. The court doesn't go out looking for battles to fight. Whatever is brought before it, it adjudicates. So the flip side of it is that even if there is a holistic picture and a pattern, sometimes the court tends to go into the tunnel vision of the pleadings before it.
Hmm.
So I doubt that any court in India will go into it suo motu. But if there is a specific petition on any specific issue, the courts are bound to look into it.
I want you to also tell us, your opinion about the matter in Surat, where there were other candidates who withdrew their candidature. Reports in the press said that they faced pressure, and that is why they withdrew their candidature. The one Congress candidate also had a situation where their application or their candidature papers were invalid because the people who put the signatures there, then said these are not our signatures. Do you believe this is a violation of the fundamental right of the people of Surat to vote in who they want to power?
Well, there's a nice little question of law as to whether voting is a fundamental right or only a statutory right. We lawyers and judges can keep going around and around that question also. But yes, the people of Surat were robbed of their chance of having a candidate selected after a contest. Elections are part of the basic structure of democracy in this country, and it is only in the contending of parties and the public then exercising a choice between the contending parties that final choices are made. So if you say that we will have an election where only Kim Il Jong will stand,
Mm.
then that is not a free and fair election, whether it happens in Surat or in Indore or anywhere else.
There is also a story that has come up today in the Scroll, where Scroll tested out the mechanisms the Election Commission has made available for ordinary citizens to file complaints. Neither of those two mechanisms are actually working. The apps tend to crash. And apparently, citizens who have been complaining about various things have all reached a dead end. Again, there is this overwhelming sense of helplessness among citizens who have not found their names on voters' lists, who disagree with what is happening in the process right now, but feel like nobody's doing anything about it, Mr. Hegde.
Well, everybody has to pitch in. Not many of us actually check the voters' lists well ahead at the time of deletion. The parties also do not, I mean, other than the BJP, the other parties also do not check the lists very carefully. Very often, uh, it is the party with a great ground game
Mm.
that looks at the electorate, figures out who is likely to vote for them, and ensures that its voters reach the booth. It also figures out who is likely not to vote for them, and they try to keep them away from the elections. They also figure out who continue on the voters list but have moved away or have died, and those things. So unless there are two well matched parties who are watching each other's game, there is a kind of walkover given to whoever has the stronger ground game. But
Mm.
as individual citizens,
Yes.
it also becomes our duty to check that the names of everybody in the household
Mm.
are registered as voters, have not been thereafter taken off the voters list, and if they are taken off while they are still entitled to vote, to complain immediately. Here, I think a strong non-partisan citizens movement, which could get into the data of all these things, is really required. You may, I mean, just to look at it from a foreign perspective, uh, the in Georgia, it was a community in Georgia in the US. It was a community organizer who lost a previous election, who actually enthused the Democratic vote base to get its two senators elected, as well as to get President Biden elected out there. So now is the time for more and more citizens groups to be actively involved in the mechanics of the election. You
But Mr.
cannot
I
rely on
appreciate.
3 election commissioners and 1 Supreme Court.
No, I appreciate what you're saying. Again, I'm reading out of an article written by Scroll just today, where they've listed out a series of ordinary citizens who have filed complaints with the Election Commission about that one speech made by the Prime Minister, where he talked about Muslims as infiltrators or those who have more children. According to Scroll, they have written letters, they have written emails to the Election Commission and received absolutely no response. Opposition parties have also filed complaints and have received no response. So, where should these people go next if the Election Commission is just choosing to ignore all the complaints that are being filed?
Then they have to go to court. And I believe today there has been a petition filed by Mr. Dr. E.S. Sharma, who has been a former bureaucrat, a former power secretary, and former dean of IIM Bangalore, on some of these speeches. This has been filed in the Supreme Court. Bar and bench has reported it. And hopefully, sometime next week, that petition will come up. But as I told you, that the Supreme Court can't take over micromanaging it. But the Supreme Court can certainly ask for explanations and can certainly nudge the commission into action.
But all of that is likely to happen post the election being over, right?
Yes. No. At least uh, the election commission can be asked for certain what have you done on these things? And the Supreme Court might ask for, might keep an eye on it, and have it even during the vacations, because there are vacation benches. So the very fact that the Supreme Court is looking over its shoulders might then nudge the Election Commission into action,
Mr. Hegde,
into greater action than what it has done so far.
Yeah. Do you believe that this also calls to some extent for an overhaul of the Representation of People's Act, which governs the Election Commission and its powers and its ability to do something? Or do you believe that the Election Commission has enough powers, it just needs to be nudged to do something about it?
No, the Election Commission has a vast repository of powers under 324 of the Constitution. It's nothing that it lacks powers. With the same powers, Mr. T.N. Seshan and Mr. Lingdo and others ran a tight ship. See, the equivalent is like a cricket umpire. The cricket umpire can't play the game, but if he deliberately refuses to see body line bowling or any other thing like that. So there was a great instance way back in the 70s in New Zealand, when India had a set of horrible umpires from New Zealand, and somebody got clean bowled out there. Venkatragavan was the bowler. He appealed, and the umpire said, yes, he's bowled. He said, I know he's bowled, but is he out? So it is like that. If the umpires choose not to see things, then the umpires have to be made to. Or at some future stage, umpires have to be replaced. Because going on that New Zealand analogy, that was an era when the home team got to choose the umpires. Thereafter, we've now moved on to international umpires.
I do want to ask you about another situation that has come into the news, that in Gujarat, in the Dahod Lok Sabha seat, there's now been a video that has gone viral where the son of the BJP MP candidate actually went into the booth, live streamed himself bogus voting into the box. And while that has now, we understand the police have taken action, it draws a question really into who's watching every single booth at this point, and is this happening on a larger scale, and how do we then trust the process as citizens?
Well, the Election Commission has called for a repoll in that particular segment, possibly. Yes. But yes, everywhere you do require oversight, and it is now technology does allow you to have oversight. You can ensure privacy in the booth, but the general monitoring of people inside the voting stations and all that can be done with a central control room, which should be accessible to all parties. I don't think that kind of mechanism exists. That, okay, in a central control room, switch on the video for XYZ high school in that particular area. So if you get reports from there that look, that in that particular voting station things are happening, or somebody is jabbing away, then the fact that a particular person is inside the voting booth for half an hour or something like that, that can be evidenced and action taken. But at the end of the day, we tend to sort of wake up from election to election, and there is always this great sense that we must trust our institutions. I say trust but verify, and where it is possible to technologically verify, pay for that technology.
Mr. Hegde, I want to ask this question again. We are the largest democracy in the world, a democracy that is a living, breathing thing that needs care and tending to. We are currently having an election. Given everything you've seen so far, will you call this election fair?
I, I would think that it has been substantially unfair in certain areas. But overall, I would still reserve judgment because just about half the seats have been done. And please look at it. People always know whether an election is fair or unfair. We've had elections in troubled areas before. We've had elections in Assam at the height of the Assam agitation. We've had elections in Kashmir at the height of violence there, and then there was very little voting. So what really worries me is also this, that even in the strong, peaceful areas, there is now increased voter apathy. People are not being enthused. That is something which is not good for the country, and that is something which even the parties which are winning, or whichever party wins, they have to they have to really work at it, at getting the confidence of every section of society, those who voted for them, those who voted against them, and those who stayed at home.
All right. Mr. Hegde, thank you so much for speaking with me this evening about the Election Commission, its action, the swiftness of its action or the lack of swiftness, and what we should be doing as citizens as we watch this election play out over the next month or so. Sanjay Hegde, Senior Advocate of the Supreme Court, thank you for speaking with us. For our audience who are watching, please like, share, and subscribe. Share this video with other people you think will find it useful. I've also put out a separate video this morning about the powers of the Election Commission as per the law. The law that governs it and everything that it is allowed to do. So take a look at that video as well. We'll be back in 5 minutes with What's Up with the News, where we will read and react to everything that's happened in the news today. So do join us for that as well.